The council chamber stank of arrogance that day. Captain Matthew Rains had stood at the long, gleaming obsidian table for 6 hours, listening to smug words dressed up as diplomacy. Around him, the great powers of the galaxy, the Varkari, the Junoan Syndics, the Orekth Dominion, had taken turns reminding humanity of its place. A young species, a dangerous species, a species that should know better than to demand equal standing. Matthew had known it was coming. The signs were all there. Even before Earth's delegation had entered the spiral tower of the Galactic Council on Varos Prime, rumors of betrayal had reached their ears. Promised trade deals were being quietly scuttled. Treaty guarantees had been rewritten without notice. Council members whispered about sanctions and containment. And now, after 6 hours of thinly veiled threats masked as peace talks, it was official. Humanity was being boxed in, neutered, smiled at and stabbed in the back. Matthew's jaw was tight as Councillor Drellis of the Varkari finished speaking, her 4 eyes glittering with false kindness. "And so, for the preservation of galactic harmony," she said, "Earth must agree to the proposed restrictions on its military expansion. Surely, Captain Rains, you can see this is for the greater good." The chamber was silent, all eyes on him. The translation implants fed the words into his ear in perfect clarity. For the greater good. For the greater good of whom? Matthew thought grimly. Certainly not Earth. He rose from his seat slowly, deliberately. Behind him, Ambassador Holt and the rest of the Earth delegation looked pale, their lips tight. They knew what was coming. Matthew didn't bother with the usual courtesy phrases. No flowery acknowledgments, no feigned gratitude for the Council's guidance. He stared at them, the smug faces of the species who had once begged for Earth's help against the Trivar incursions just a decade ago. Back when humanity's fleets had turned the tide, saving 6 core worlds. How quickly gratitude faded. His voice, when it came, was cold steel. "Let me be clear," he said. "Earth will not surrender its right to defend itself. Nor will we accept being treated as a subordinate species in a council where we have bled and sacrificed more than most." Drellis blinked, her smile fading. The Orekth warlord to her left rumbled in disapproval. Matthew pressed on. His gaze swept the chamber, locking eyes with each representative. "For months," he said, "we've honored these peace talks, despite provocations, despite the sabotage of our trade routes, despite the Council's refusal to address attacks on our colonies. And today, you expect us to sign away our future." He let the words hang. "Earth will not comply. Effective immediately, we are withdrawing from these negotiations." A shocked murmur swept the room. One of the Junoan Syndics, pale and elegant, half rose from her seat. "Captain Rains, surely you—" "I am not finished." Matthew's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "We will return to Sol. Any further aggression against human interests will be met in kind. If the Council chooses to escalate, know that humanity does not fear war." Silence, heavy, thick, oppressive. Finally, Councillor Drellis spoke again, her voice brittle. "This is a dangerous course, Captain. It will isolate your species." Matthew allowed himself a thin smile, not one of warmth, but of contempt. "We'd rather stand alone than kneel among liars." Without another word, he turned. The human delegation followed, boots echoing against the polished floor as they strode from the chamber. Behind them, the stunned council members sat frozen. In the hours that followed, the news swept across the galaxy. Humans withdraw from peace talks. The Galaxy Council admits its blunder. The headlines were everywhere. Public outcry in some sectors, quiet panic in others. On Earth, there was grim approval. Humanity had been humiliated enough. Back on his ship, ISS Revenant, Matthew watched the news feeds with a stony expression. Too late, the Council was scrambling. issuing statements, offering half-hearted apologies, blaming miscommunication. But the die was cast. And Matthew knew one thing. There would be no peace now. The ISS Revenant slipped into high orbit above Veros Prime within the hour, its massive bulk dwarfing the civilian vessels clustered near the station rings. From the ship's command deck, Captain Matthew Rains stood at the main viewport, arms folded, eyes cold. "Status?" he asked. Commander Briggs, a grizzled veteran with deep lines on his face and a voice like gravel, answered without hesitation. "Our delegation is aboard. All ships in the Solarian fleet are reporting ready for departure." "Any sign of pursuit?" Briggs shook his head. "Nothing overt, but the local traffic control's stalling our clearance. Probably waiting for a council warship to escort us." Matthew's jaw clenched. Of course they were. "Run a full ECM sweep. Ready shields and weapons, quietly. If they try to box us in, we punch through." Briggs's smile was grim. "Understood." Matthew turned back to the viewport, watching the swirling clouds of the planet below. It had been a damn long few weeks. Months, really, of hollow speeches, false promises, and quiet betrayals. And now, finally, humanity had made its stand. But stands had consequences. He keyed the communication. "Get me Ambassador Holt." A moment later, Holt's face appeared on the console. Weary, drawn. The man looked 10 years older than he had a month ago. "Captain," Holt greeted him. "I assume you've seen the Council's latest statement." "I've seen it." It was pathetic. The Council's official communiqué had gone out just minutes after they'd stormed from the chamber. A desperate attempt to control the narrative. Words like misunderstanding, temporary withdrawal, ongoing friendship were thrown around. Hollow bullshit. "They're trying to paint us as unstable aggressors," Holt said bitterly, "saying our withdrawal was emotional, impulsive." Matthew snorted. "Let them. Anyone paying attention knows the truth." Holt leaned forward slightly. "EarthGov's already responding. President Langley issued a statement an hour ago. We're mobilizing reserves." Matthew's eyes narrowed. That was faster than he'd expected, but not surprising. The writing had been on the wall for weeks. The blockade of the Martian trade convoys, the pirate raids in the Tau Ceti colonies that had Council fingerprints all over them. The assassination attempt on the Terran ambassador last month, quietly swept under the rug. And now, open political isolation. "What's our fallback?" Matthew asked. Holt's mouth was tight. "Fleet Command's issuing silent orders to all Solarian task forces. Defensive posture. But we both know that's going to escalate. The Orekth will push. The Varkari won't want to look weak." Matthew nodded. "And if they do? Then Earth stands alone." Matthew let out a slow breath. The phrase had been used so many times in recent days it was almost cliché, but the meaning was real. Earth was alone, isolated by the very council it had once helped save, and soon it would be at war. The tension aboard the Revenant was thick as the hours passed. The clearance delay dragged on, the council's traffic control citing technical difficulties. But Matthew wasn't fooled. He knew a stalling action when he saw one. In the tactical pit, Lieutenant Vaughn was running constant scans. "Captain," she reported, "Council fleet elements moving into position. 1 cruiser, 2 frigates, coming in from the station's dark side." Matthew's face hardened. "Briggs." The old commander was already moving. "All batteries online. ECM active. Fighters on standby." Matthew opened a channel to the fleet. "All Solarian vessels. Prepare for immediate departure. No hostile action unless fired upon. But if they block us, we force through." One by one, the acknowledgements came back. He switched to the comm again. "Ambassador Holt, secure yourself. We're punching out." "Understood. Godspeed, Captain." Matthew stood at the center of the bridge, every muscle tight, gaze fixed on the tactical display. 3 Council warships. They weren't enough to truly threaten the Revenant, not if it fought back. But a single shot exchanged here could spark a war. And that, he suspected, was exactly what some Council factions wanted. When the transmission came through, it was no surprise. ISS Revenant, this is Varos Prime Control, came the clipped voice of a Junoan officer. You are ordered to hold position. A Council security detachment will escort your fleet to a secure anchorage for further diplomatic review. Matthew's reply was ice. Negative, Varos Control. We are departing. Any attempt to impede will be considered hostile. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, a flicker on the tactical board. Cruiser charging weapons, Vaughn shouted. Shields up, Briggs barked. Matthew's voice was like a blade. Helm, full burn, break orbit, formation Delta. The Revenant's massive engines roared to life, the ship surging forward. All around it, the Solarian fleet followed. Frigates, cruisers, even a few battered civilian escort ships. On the display, the Council warships shifted, blocking their path. Council cruiser locking missiles, Vaughn called. Matthew didn't hesitate. Firing solution on their engines, only if they shoot. Seconds stretched like hours. Then, a missile lock warning blared. Missiles incoming! Fire! The Revenant's heavy batteries spoke, beams of searing energy lancing out. The Council cruiser's forward shields collapsed under the barrage, its drive section hammered. A moment later, the Solarian ships unleashed their own counterfire, punching a hole through the blockade. The Revenant roared past the crippled cruiser, the rest of the fleet in tight formation behind it. Status? Matthew demanded. Minor shield damage, Briggs reported. No casualties. Council cruiser disabled, no pursuit. Matthew's jaw was tight. Good. Set course for Sol. Max burn. Let's get the hell out of their space. The escape sparked a galactic firestorm. By the time the Revenant reached the Sol Gate 4 days later, the news had already spread. Footage of the Council's blockade attempt and the human fleet's breakout flooded every media channel. Council warships fire on human delegation. Earth Fleet Forces blockade run, casualties averted. Galactic tensions explode after failed peace talks. And, inevitably, humans withdraw from peace talks. The Galaxy Council admits its blunder. It was the phrase that stuck. Across neutral worlds, independent systems, even among Council members themselves, voices of dissent rose. The Council had overplayed its hand. Humanity's withdrawal had exposed their corruption, and the violent blockade attempt only sealed it. But none of that comforted Matthew as the Revenant entered Sol space. War was coming. He met with the Admiralty the next day, a private holoconference with EarthGov and Fleet Command. The faces on the screen were grim. President Langley, Admiral Harrow, Defense Minister Calder. You did the right thing, Captain, Harrow said, voice gruff. If you'd held position, they'd have arrested the delegation or worse. Matthew nodded. I couldn't allow that. Calder spoke next. The Council's fractured. Some factions are already calling for a punitive fleet against us. Others are panicking, but the threat is real. Langley leaned forward. Earth stands alone now, Captain, but we stand, and we'll fight if we must. Matthew's gaze was steady. We will. Later, alone in his quarters aboard the Revenant, Matthew stared out at the familiar stars of Sol. It had happened. The war they'd all feared, all tried to avoid, was now inevitable. And as he sat in the quiet darkness, one thought burned in his mind. They thought they could break us. They thought they could buy us off with hollow words and threats. Now, they'll see what humanity is truly made of. He rose, straightened his uniform, and returned to the bridge. The storm was coming, and Earth would meet it head-on. Varos Prime was burning, not with fire, but with outrage. In the council spire, the aftermath of the failed peace talks rippled through every chamber. News feeds showed endless replays of the Revenant's daring breakout, the crippled council cruiser drifting in shame. And now, in the council's inner sanctum, the knives were out. Councillor Drellis sat at the high table, her hands folded with practiced calm, though her inner fury boiled. Around her, the most powerful voices of the galaxy, the Orekth warlords, the Junoan syndics, the Tarkan technarchs, argued in an escalating din. They humiliated us. Warlord Korak of the Orekth slammed a fist down, the heavy table creaking under the blow. A human fleet attacked our ships and fled with impunity. This is war. Your blockade attempt was unauthorized, Syndic Vera shot back coldly. You escalated the situation. They were already preparing for war, Korak bellowed. You think they mobilized this fast by accident? The humans planned this. They baited us. A ripple of murmured agreement spread through the room. Drellis's gaze swept the chamber, calculating. The humans' withdrawal had shaken the council, exposed their divisions for all to see. And worse, public sympathy in several neutral sectors was drifting toward Earth. They are a threat, she said finally, her voice cutting through the noise. A dangerous, unstable species, but open war now would fracture the council further. We must proceed carefully. Technarch Velnar, her closest ally among the Tarkan, nodded. Target their outer colonies first. Proxy actions. Bleed them, contain them, make them overextend. Agreed, Drellis said. Full war can wait. But not everyone was convinced. Warlord Korak's eyes burned. You talk of containment, I talk of annihilation. If we hesitate, they will strike first. And for the first time, Drellis wasn't entirely sure he was wrong. Back in Sol, Earth was already moving. Fleet Command was mobilizing faster than anyone had thought possible. The Revenant docked in high orbit over Mars, its crew working around the clock to rearm and repair after the Varos breakout. In Fleet HQ, Captain Matthew Rains stood before the holomap of Sol space, surrounded by admirals, strategists, and ministers. Confirmed reports of Orekth ships massing near the Epsilon Gate, Admiral Harrow said, grim-faced. Junoan commerce fleets pulling out of Solarian trade routes. Several border colonies reporting unidentified probes. Matthew's gaze was hard. They're probing our defenses. Exactly. Harrow nodded. Council factions are split. Some want all-out war, others prefer slow escalation, but the knives are out. President Langley appeared on the main holo, her voice steady. We've sent envoys to the neutral sectors, but we can't count on allies. We don't need them, Matthew said, but we do need to hit back, hard enough to make the council think twice. There was a pause. The room was tense. Everyone knew the stakes. Finally, Harrow spoke. Agreed. The Orekth are the most dangerous immediate threat. If we wait, they'll strike first. Langley's voice was steel. Then we don't wait. 2 days later, Earth's first counterstrike began. Operation Iron Shield, a rapid deployment of Solarian task forces to the border colonies, designed to fortify key positions and deter council aggression. Matthew led the first wave personally aboard the Revenant. As the fleet slipped through the Proxima Gate, he stood on the bridge, watching the stars blur past. Commander Briggs joined him. Reports just in, he said quietly. Orekth raiders hit the Sigma Eridani colony. Civilian losses heavy. Matthew's fists clenched. Any survivors? Some. Local militia drove them off. Barely. Matthew's jaw tightened. The council's so-called containment had already begun. They weren't wasting time with diplomacy anymore. Signal all fleet elements, he said. No more passive defense. If they come for us, we hit back. Double. Aye, Captain. At Sigma Eridani, the scars of the raid were fresh. Burned-out habitats, shattered orbital stations, drifting wreckage, all the grim marks of Orekth savagery. When the Revenant emerged from hyperspace, the survivors' desperate transmissions flooded in. "This is Governor Strathmore. To any Terran fleet. We need aid. They took thousands." Matthew's face was a mask of cold fury. "Deploy relief teams," he ordered. "Full military quarantine, and I want every Orekth ship in this sector hunted down." Commander Briggs hesitated. "That'll escalate things fast, sir." Matthew's voice was low, dangerous. "Good. Let them know Earth won't be a punching bag." The first strike came less than a day later. Orekth raiders, fast, brutal, overconfident, hit the outer Sigma defense perimeter. But this time, they weren't facing helpless civilians. This time they faced Revenant. The battle was short and bloody. Matthew stood at the center of the command deck, eyes locked on the tactical display. "Target their engines," he ordered. "No escape." Beams and missiles ripped into the Orekth ships, cutting them apart. The enemy's famed ruthlessness met something colder. Human fury honed by betrayal. When it was over, debris fields drifted where the raiders had been. Briggs exhaled. "They weren't expecting us to fight back this hard." "They will now," Matthew said, "and we're just getting started." The news spread like wildfire. Earth fleet destroys Orekth raiders at Sigma. Human counterstrike raises tensions. Council divided. Neutral worlds. Question Council legitimacy after civilian massacre. Even in the core Council sectors, protests erupted. Civilian populations, weary of endless wars and Council arrogance, began questioning why Earth was being targeted at all. In the Council chambers, panic grew. "This is spiraling out of control," Syndic Vera said bitterly. "Public opinion is turning." "They drew first blood," Warlord Korak snarled. "Now they must pay." Councillor Drellis said nothing for a long moment. Inside, her calculations shifted. The humans were not breaking. If anything, they were uniting. And if the war continued this way, the Council might not survive it. But too much pride, too much blood had already been spilled. There was no going back now. Back aboard the Revenant, Matthew knew it too. As he looked over the latest intelligence reports, he saw the truth written in every line. The Council wouldn't stop. They couldn't afford to. If Earth stood tall, the Council's authority would crumble. Other species would follow. The old order would collapse. And so they would fight to preserve their power, just as humanity would fight to preserve its freedom. Commander Briggs entered the ready room, face grim. "Message from Fleet Command, sir," he said. "New orders." Matthew glanced at the display, and his eyes narrowed. It was exactly what he'd expected. The Council was massing a joint strike fleet near the Epsilon Gate. Bigger than anything they'd used so far. This wouldn't be another raid. This would be war. Matthew stood slowly, his expression hard. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "Prepare for full combat operations." Briggs nodded once. "Aye, Captain." As the door closed behind him, Matthew looked out at the stars. They'd tried to box Earth in, tried to break its spirit with arrogance and lies. But now, they'd pushed too far. And humanity had nothing left to lose. The Epsilon Gate loomed ahead, a vast ring of ancient alien metal, pulsing with faint light against the darkness of space. Beyond it lay the contested sectors, and the Council's assembled strike fleet. From the Revenant's bridge, Captain Matthew Rains watched the tactical map update with every passing second. "Enemy fleet composition?" he asked, voice steady. Lieutenant Vaughn answered crisply. 1 Varkari battlecruiser, 2 Orekth assault carriers, 4 Junoan heavy frigates, and support elements, Estimated total, 27 ships. A formidable force, not overwhelming, but carefully chosen to test Earth's resolve. Commander Briggs leaned in. They're not here to negotiate. No, Matthew agreed. They're here to bleed us. But they would find Earth ready. Operation Iron Shield had mobilized faster than anyone on the Council expected. Within hours of the Sigma Eridani battle, human fleets across the border sectors had shifted into full combat posture. Now, at Epsilon, the Solarian 5th and 6th Fleets, nearly 40 warships under Matthew's command, waited in silence. Status of the fleet? Matthew asked. All ships holding position, Vaughn reported. Weapons hot. Crews on full alert. Matthew looked out over his crew, hardened men and women, veterans of endless brush wars and pirate hunts. Now, facing the most powerful military alliance in the galaxy, they stood without flinching. Open fleet-wide channel, he ordered. A soft chime confirmed the link. Matthew spoke, his voice carrying across the void to every ship. This is Captain Rains. You all know why we're here. The Council chose this path. They thought we'd back down, that Earth would kneel. He paused, letting the words settle. But today, we show them what it means to stand. We fight not for conquest, but for survival. For every colony they burned, every life they took, we fight because no one else will defend us. Another pause. Then cold steel. We fight, and we will win. The enemy fleet emerged minutes later, engines flaring as they dropped from hyperspace. Council fleet entering combat range, Vaughn called. No hails, no attempt at communication. Of course not. The Council had already committed to this fight. Diplomacy was dead. Target priority? Briggs asked quietly. Matthew's eyes locked on the display. Varkari battlecruiser first, break their spear, then roll up the flanks. He straightened, every muscle coiled. Sound general quarters, all hands, battle stations. A deep klaxon echoed through the Revenant, followed by the tense hum of a ship preparing for war. The first shots came from the Council side, bright lances of plasma streaking toward the human lines. Enemy opening fire, Vaughn confirmed. No holding back. Matthew's jaw tightened. Return fire, all batteries. The Revenant's heavy cannons boomed, energy beams ripping through the void. Across the line, Earth's ships unleashed a disciplined counter-volley. Within moments, the space around the Epsilon gate became a maelstrom, shields flaring, ships maneuvering at breakneck speed. Matthew moved through the bridge, issuing rapid orders. Frigates, screening formation. Keep the Orekth bombers off our heavies. Vaughn, track Junoan flanking elements. I want firing solutions ready. Briggs, time our main salvo for when that battlecruiser's shields cycle. The battle unfolded fast. The Varkari battlecruiser drove straight into the heart of the human formation, turrets blazing. Around it, the Orekth carriers launched wave after wave of fighters, fast, agile, deadly. But the humans were ready. Solarian destroyers swept in, flak cannons shredding incoming bombers. Frigates lured Junoan ships into crossfire traps, hammering them with massed volleys. And at the center, Revenant led the charge. Main batteries, full power, Matthew ordered. Target their shield nodes. Massive beams lanced out, slamming into the Varkari ship. Its shields rippled, staggered, then faltered. Direct hit, Vaughn called. Enemy shields down. Finish it, Matthew said coldly. A coordinated salvo from 3 human cruisers struck home, tearing through the battlecruiser's armor. Explosions rippled along its hull, then a final, blinding blast as its reactor went critical. A cheer rose from the human comms, quickly stifled as the fight raged on. The loss of their spearhead shook the Council fleet. Junoan frigates faltered, trying to regroup. Orekth carriers pushed harder, their fighters swarming desperately, but human flak and point defense held firm. Matthew pressed the advantage. Left flank, advance, roll them up. The Solarian ships surged forward, hammering the disorganized Council elements. One Junoan frigate was caught in a crossfire, torn apart in seconds. The tide was turning, but victory was never bloodless. "Enemy bombers breaking through," Briggs warned. 2 Orekth squadrons slipped past the screen, diving toward the Revenant. "Brace!" Matthew shouted. "Point defense! Engage!" Cannons roared, but some bombers got through. Explosions rocked the Revenant's hull, alarms blaring. "Shields holding," Vaughn reported. "Hull breaches on decks 5 and 6. Casualties reported." Matthew's eyes were ice. "Damage control. Maintain fire." The battle dragged on for another hour. Brutal, relentless. Ship after ship burned. On both sides, crews fought and died amid smoke and blood. But slowly, inexorably, the Council fleet began to break. With their battlecruiser gone and their formations shattered, the remaining Council ships fell back in disorder. "Enemy retreating," Vaughn confirmed. "They're pulling out." Matthew's voice was grim. "No pursuit. We hold position." Across the bridge, exhausted cheers broke out. Not triumph, but grim relief. They had survived. They had won. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the galaxy. "Human fleet repels Council strike at Epsilon." "First major Council defeat in open combat." "Neutral worlds question Council legitimacy." Public opinion shifted further. On many independent worlds, protests erupted. Merchants and traders, already resentful of Council corruption, began openly supporting Earth. Even within the Council chambers, fractures deepened. "This cannot continue," Syndic Vera thundered. "We have provoked open war, and we are losing the narrative." "We must escalate," Warlord Korak growled. "Show no weakness." But Drellis knew the truth. Escalation would only harden Earth's resolve. Already, human fleets were reinforcing their borders. Already, sympathetic factions whispered of supporting Earth behind the scenes. The Council had gambled and lost. And now, the galaxy watched. Back on the Revenant, Matthew stood in the shattered forward observation deck, gazing out at the stars. Repairs were underway. The crew was exhausted, but alive. Briggs approached quietly. "Word from Fleet Command," he said. "EarthGov's authorizing new operations. Hit-and-run strikes. Disrupt Council logistics." Matthew nodded. "It's time we stopped playing defense." Briggs hesitated. "There's more. Intel reports some neutral worlds are offering covert support. Supplies, safe harbors." Matthew's eyes narrowed. "They're starting to see the Council for what it is." "They are." A long silence followed. Finally, Matthew spoke, voice low. "They wanted to isolate us, to crush us with arrogance and fear." He looked out at the stars, now a battlefield. "But they made one mistake," Briggs raised an eyebrow. "Sir?" "They forgot who we are." Matthew turned, resolve burning in his eyes. "They forgot. We're human." The Revenant's war room hummed with quiet intensity. Holographic maps floated above the central table, displaying the current state of the conflict. Stars, gates, trade routes, fleet positions. Red for Council space, blue for Solarian territories. And now, a growing patchwork of gray, neutral worlds beginning to drift toward Earth's side. Captain Matthew Rains stood at the center, arms folded. Around him were Fleet Command's senior staff, Commander Briggs, Lieutenant Vaughn, Commodore Hale from the 6th Fleet, and 2 intelligence officers from EarthGov. "Summary," Matthew ordered. One of the intelligence officers, a sharp-eyed woman named Keller, spoke first. "Council fleets are pulling back from Epsilon," she said. "Their defeat hit them harder than expected. Orekth forces have withdrawn to core sectors. Farkari units are in disarray. Junoans? Matthew asked. Keller smiled thinly. The trade guilds are panicking. Several houses are pushing for a negotiated settlement, quietly. Matthew's jaw tightened. So they bleed us with one hand and beg for talks with the other. Exactly. Commander Briggs leaned in. Sir, we've got an opportunity here. Council supply lines are overextended, especially in the rim sectors. If we hit them now, we can cripple their logistics. Matthew's gaze swept the room. Everyone knew what he was about to say. We stop playing defense, he said. We take the fight to them. Within hours, Operation Iron Hammer was greenlit. A series of fast, hard-hitting strikes against key council outposts and supply depots across the border sectors. No drawn-out battles, no pointless grandstanding. Just pain. The Revenant led the first wave, a task force of 20 ships, heavy cruisers, fast frigates, carrier escorts. Their first target, the Tarkin outpost at Delta Leonis, a key relay for Council fleet movements. They hit the station at dawn. Emerging from hyperspace under full stealth, the human task force caught the defenders completely off guard. Enemy sensors delayed. They weren't expecting us, Vaughn reported. Matthew's voice was cold. Execute strike pattern Alpha. Beams and torpedoes slammed into the Tarkin defenses. Within minutes, the outpost's shield grid collapsed. Council ships scrambled to respond. Too late. Human boarding teams stormed the station, capturing key systems before the defenders could even regroup. The entire operation took less than 2 hours. By the time the Council reinforcements arrived, the human fleet was gone, leaving a smoking ruin behind. The message was clear. Earth was no longer on the back foot. And across the galaxy, neutral worlds took notice. At Veros Prime, panic gripped the Council chambers. Councillor Drellis watched the latest reports with a sinking heart. Delta Leonis outpost destroyed. No Council survivors. Human fleets executing deep strikes across border sectors. Neutral world of Thesser declares non-alignment, refuses Council fleet entry. It was unraveling faster than she'd feared. This is madness, Syndic Vera snapped. We should have contained them when we had the chance. And now, Warlord Korak growled, now they spit in our faces. The Council was divided. The Hawks demanded escalation, full mobilization, total war. The pragmatists saw the truth. The longer the conflict dragged on, the more sympathy Earth gained. And beneath it all, a deeper fear that Earth's defiance would inspire others. Drellis spoke at last. We underestimated them, she said. Now we must decide. Do we risk total war or find a way out? No one answered, because there was no easy way out. Meanwhile, Matthew's fleet struck again. Corrin's Reach, a key fuel depot for Council fleets. Tassari Gate, a relay station controlling hyperspace routes. Orekth Forward Base at Gamma Triangulae, annihilated in a single night raid. Each success emboldened Earth's allies. On distant neutral worlds, old hatreds of the Council stirred. Messages began to reach EarthGov through back channels. Free traders of Helion offer supplies. Independent warlords in the rim sectors seeking alliance. Several neutral planets refusing Council conscription orders. And one message, more dangerous than all the others. Elements within the Tarkin Technarchy willing to negotiate. Matthew read the latest intel report in his quarters, face grim. Briggs entered quietly. You've seen the offer? He asked. Matthew nodded. If it's real, it changes everything. Tarkin ships and technology were among the best in the galaxy. If even a fraction of their technarchs defected, the Council would be crippled. But it's a risk, Matthew said. Could be bait, could be factional infighting. Briggs shrugged. This whole damn war's a risk. Matthew looked up, eyes burning. We've come too far to back down now. EarthGov moved fast. Secret envoys were dispatched, covert meetings arranged in shadowy corners of the galaxy. And while diplomacy unfolded in the background, the war pressed on. Matthew's fleet continued to harry the Council. Fast raids, precision strikes, coordinated with growing insurgencies on occupied worlds. The war was evolving. It was no longer Council versus Earth. It was old order versus new reality. On the Revenant's bridge, the latest message came through. Vaughn read it aloud, voice tight with disbelief. Planet Ardentia, neutral world, has declared full alliance with Earth. A stunned silence followed. Ardentia was a wealthy trade hub, strategically vital, long a staunch Council ally. Briggs exhaled. That'll shake them. Matthew's mind raced. With Ardentia's support, supply lines would open, safe ports for human fleets, a base deep in Council territory. But it also meant one thing. The war was about to explode. Council response was swift and brutal. Within days, a combined Varkari-Orekth fleet was dispatched to retake Ardentia. Massive forces and far beyond anything seen so far. Matthew received the intel briefing with cold focus. "This is it," he said. "The turning point." Briggs nodded. "If we hold Ardentia, we prove Earth can win." "And if we lose?" Briggs's face was grim. "Then we lose everything." Preparations began at once. Matthew personally led the fleet to Ardentia. Reinforcements streamed in, ships from across Solarian space, volunteers from neutral worlds, Ardentian defense forces. In orbit above the planet, a ragtag but determined fleet assembled. Matthew addressed them over fleet-wide communication. "This is no longer about survival," he said. "This is about the future." He paused, voice steel. "The Council fears us because we dare to stand. Today, we show the galaxy why." Across the fleet, thousands of voices answered as one. For Earth, for freedom. And as the enemy fleet loomed in the distance, engines flaring, weapons charged, Matthew stood on the Revenant's bridge, eyes cold. "They wanted a war," he said quietly. "They're about to get one." The enemy fleet appeared like a storm on the edge of space. Through the Revenant's reinforced viewports, Captain Matthew Rains watched as the Council forces closed in. Hundreds of ships, battle cruisers, assault carriers, frigates in tight, brutal formations, bearing down on Ardentia with grim purpose. "They're not here to negotiate," Commander Briggs muttered beside him. Matthew didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everyone on the bridge knew what was coming. Lieutenant Vaughn's voice was steady. "Council fleet strength confirmed. Over 200 vessels. Primary elements, Varkari heavy cruisers, Orekth assault wings, Juno and Dreadnought support." Matthew's eyes never left the tactical display. "And our side? 74 Solarian vessels, 25 Ardentian defense ships, 8 neutral volunteers, mostly retrofitted freighters and corvettes. Outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Outgunned, outclassed, but not outmatched. Not today." "Status on planetary defenses?" Matthew asked. "Ardentia's orbital platforms are active, anti-ship batteries online, surface-to-orbit cannons on full charge," Vaughn reported. "They're ready." Matthew allowed a tight nod. Ardentia had thrown in completely with Earth. No half measures. They knew the cost, knew what would happen if the Council broke through, and they were willing to pay it. He turned to Briggs. "They'll hit the defense platforms first," Matthew said, "then drive straight for the planet." Briggs nodded grimly. "Standard shock assault, overwhelming force, orbital bombardment, mop up survivors." Matthew's voice was steel. "We don't let them get that far." The plan was simple, brutal. Hit them first. Hard, fast. Break their spear. The Revenant would lead a strike force aimed at the heart of the Council formation, the Varkari command ships. Cut off the head, and the body would flail. It was suicide on paper. but it was the only chance they had. Matthew keyed the comms. Fleet-wide channel. A soft chime. "This is Captain Rains," he said. "You see what's coming. You know what's at stake. Today, Earth doesn't stand alone. Today, Ardentius stands with us. Free men and women, not council slaves." He paused, voice low and cold. "They want us broken. They want us afraid." He looked around at his crew, every face steady. "Let's show them what they should fear." The fleets closed the distance. Matthew stood at the center of the Revenant's bridge, hands clasped behind his back, as the first shots were fired. Long-range railguns from Ardentia's platforms opened up, slamming into the leading council ships. Explosions blossomed in the black. 1, 2 Varkari frigates crippled. The council responded with a wall of plasma and missiles. Energy beams slashed across the void. The battle had begun. "Formations Alpha through Delta. Engage," Matthew ordered. The Solarian ships surged forward, engines flaring, weapons hot. The Revenant led the spearhead, flanked by the heavy cruisers Aegis and Hammerfall, with squadrons of destroyers screening ahead. Matthew's target was clear. The Varkari command carrier Zerathul, at the center of the enemy lines. "Punch a hole," Matthew said. The clash was brutal. Council fighters swarmed like hornets, weaving between the massive ships. Human flak cannons filled space with deadly fire, carving through the attackers. Explosions tore through the blackness. Ships burned, shattered, drifted. On the Revenant, damage alarms howled. "Shields at 70%, Vaughn called. "Maintain course," Matthew said. An Orekth heavy frigate swung into their path, turrets blazing. Matthew didn't hesitate. "Forward batteries, fire!" Blinding beams of energy lanced out, tearing into the frigate's hull. It broke apart, venting atmosphere and flame. "Target down," Vaughn confirmed. The Revenant plunged through the debris, engines roaring. Ahead, the Zerathul loomed. Briggs leaned close. "We're in deep, council reinforcements moving to intercept." "We don't stop," Matthew said. "Even if we don't make it?" Matthew's mouth twisted into a grim smile. "We make it." He keyed the fleet comms. "All ships, focus fire on Zerathul. Bring it down." One by one, Solarian cruisers and destroyers locked on. Missiles streaked out. Energy beams cut the void. The Zerathul's shields flared, staggered, collapsed. Matthew seized the moment. "All forward batteries, full salvo." "Fire." The Revenant's guns boomed, a coordinated, devastating barrage that smashed into the carrier's hull. Secondary explosions tore through the Varkari flagship. And then, a massive detonation as the Zerathul's reactors went critical. A fireball bloomed, lighting the battlefield. Cheers erupted on the bridge. But Matthew wasn't celebrating. He watched the tactical display, calculating. With the Zerathul destroyed, Council Command was in chaos. Enemy formations faltered. Gaps opened. And Matthew saw an opportunity. "Push through," he ordered. "Break their line. Divide their fleet." "The Council's breaking apart," Matthew said. Briggs nodded. "Good." Matthew didn't smile. He wasn't in the mood. "We're getting reports," Briggs continued. "Some of the Council's loyalists are regrouping at Varos Prime. It's their last stand." Matthew's gaze sharpened. Varos Prime, the seat of Council power, the place where this had all begun, the betrayal, the blockade, the humiliation of Earth. It was fitting that it would end there. Orders came in from EarthGov 2 days later. Simple, final. "Advance to Varos Prime. Deliver terms of surrender. If refused, eliminate remaining Council resistance." No more negotiations. No more illusions of peace. Matthew gathered his officers. "The Council's cornered," he told them. "Some will fight to the death. Others may break. Either way, we end it at Varos Prime." Briggs grinned, the first real smile Matthew had seen in weeks. "About time." The fleet moved with precision, bypassing scattered Council loyalist forces, hammering supply lines, sowing chaos. Everywhere they went, they left a message. Earth doesn't kneel. The Council's power crumbled faster than even Keller's most optimistic estimates. In the rim sectors, warlords once loyal to the Council declared independence or outright switched sides. In the core sectors, uprisings flared. Colonists, merchants, soldiers tired of being ruled by distant, arrogant bureaucrats. And the Council? The Council sat paralyzed, terrified, waiting for the hammer to fall. As the Revenant approached Varos Prime, Matthew stood on the bridge, staring at the tactical readouts. Enemy forces detected in orbit, Vaughn reported. 23 confirmed ships, mostly Varkari and Orekth. Matthew nodded. Expected? No reinforcements, no escape routes, just desperation. He turned to Briggs. Signal them, Matthew said. A moment later, the Council fleet's flagship, the Crown of Varos, responded. Councillor Drellis herself appeared on the holofeed, her face pale but composed. Captain Rains, she said, Councillor. You intend to force our surrender? I do. She studied him. There was no hatred in her eyes, no smugness, just grim resignation. You've shattered everything, she said. Centuries of order. You've undone it in a year. Matthew's voice was hard. You did that yourselves. Drellis sighed. And if we refuse? Matthew didn't blink. Then we finish what you started. A long pause. Finally, Drellis spoke. Give me 1 hour. The feed cut. Matthew didn't trust her. He ordered the fleet into full battle readiness. Fighters deployed, point defenses primed, energy banks charged. 1 hour ticked away, and then surrender. The Crown of Varos transmitted formal terms. Unconditional surrender, immediate dissolution of Council authority, recognition of Earth's sovereignty, and the independence of all aligned worlds. It was over. Matthew stood at the head of the landing party as shuttles descended to Varos Prime. They touched down outside the Council spire, once a gleaming symbol of authority, now cracked and scarred by riots and sabotage. Drellis waited on the steps. She handed over the surrender documents without ceremony. Matthew signed them with a pen that felt heavier than it should have. And just like that, centuries of galactic order ended. The news spread across the stars. Council surrenders. Earth declares victory. New era begins. Council dissolved after crushing defeat. Varos Prime falls. Humanity's stand reshapes the galaxy. Later, aboard the Revenant, Matthew sat in his quarters, staring out at the starfield. Briggs entered quietly. It's done, Briggs said. Matthew didn't answer. Victory was supposed to feel better than this. He thought of the names, the crews lost, the civilians massacred, the worlds burned. The Council had paid for its arrogance, but at a cost. Briggs handed him a datapad. New orders from EarthGov. Matthew read them. A new galactic charter, human-led, built not on lies and intimidation, but on sovereignty and strength. A better future, maybe, if they were strong enough to hold it. Matthew set the pad down and stood. Signal the fleet, he said. Prepare for departure. We've got work to do. Briggs smiled grimly. Always. As the Revenant turned away from Varos Prime, Matthew looked out at the galaxy, battered, broken, but still burning with life. They hadn't fought for glory. They hadn't fought for conquest. They fought because no one else would. And now, the stars were theirs. Peace was a strange thing. It didn't come with banners or parades. It came with silence. Captain Matthew Rains stood alone on the Revenant's observation deck, watching the stars drift past. The war was over, officially. The Council was gone. Its remaining warlords either in hiding, dead, or scrambling to buy favor with the new order. And Earth? Earth stood at the center of it all. Victor. And now, ruler. The council's breaking apart, Matthew said. Briggs nodded. Good. Matthew didn't smile. He wasn't in the mood. We're getting reports, Briggs continued. Some of the council's loyalists are regrouping at Varos Prime. It's their last stand. Matthew's gaze sharpened. Varos Prime, the seat of council power, the place where this had all begun, the betrayal, the blockade, the humiliation of Earth. It was fitting that it would end there. Orders came in from EarthGov 2 days later. Simple, final. Advance to Varos Prime, deliver terms of surrender. If refused, eliminate remaining council resistance. No more negotiations, no more illusions of peace. Matthew gathered his officers. The council's cornered, he told them. Some will fight to the death, others may break. Either way, we end it at Varos Prime. Briggs grinned, the first real smile Matthew had seen in weeks. About time. The fleet moved with precision, bypassing scattered council loyalist forces, hammering supply lines, sowing chaos. Everywhere they went, they left a message. Earth doesn't kneel. The council's power crumbled faster than even Keller's most optimistic estimates. In the rim sectors, warlords once loyal to the council declared independence or outright switched sides. In the core sectors, uprisings flared. Colonists, merchants, soldiers tired of being ruled by distant, arrogant bureaucrats. And the council? The council sat paralyzed, terrified, waiting for the hammer to fall. As the Revenant approached Varos Prime, Matthew stood on the bridge, staring at the tactical readouts. Enemy forces detected in orbit, Vaughn reported. 23 confirmed ships, mostly Varkari and Orekth. Matthew nodded. Expected? No reinforcements, no escape routes, just desperation. He turned to Briggs. Signal them, Matthew said. A moment later, the Council fleet's flagship, the Crown of Varos, responded. Councillor Drellis herself appeared on the holofeed, her face pale but composed. Captain Rains, she said, Councillor. You intend to force our surrender? I do. She studied him. There was no hatred in her eyes, no smugness, just grim resignation. You've shattered everything, she said. Centuries of order. You've undone it in a year. Matthew's voice was hard. You did that yourselves. Drellis sighed. And if we refuse? Matthew didn't blink. Then we finish what you started. A long pause. Finally, Drellis spoke. Give me 1 hour. The feed cut. Matthew didn't trust her. He ordered the fleet into full battle readiness. Fighters deployed, point defenses primed, energy banks charged. 1 hour ticked away, and then surrender. The Crown of Varos transmitted formal terms. Unconditional surrender, immediate dissolution of council authority, recognition of Earth's sovereignty, and the independence of all aligned worlds. It was over. Matthew stood at the head of the landing party as shuttles descended to Varos Prime. They touched down outside the council spire, once a gleaming symbol of authority, now cracked and scarred by riots and sabotage. Drellis waited on the steps. She handed over the surrender documents without ceremony. Matthew signed them with a pen that felt heavier than it should have. And just like that, centuries of galactic order ended. The news spread across the stars. Council surrenders. Earth declares victory. New era begins. Council dissolved after crushing defeat. Varos Prime falls. Humanity's stand reshapes the galaxy. Later, aboard the Revenant, Matthew sat in his quarters, staring out at the starfield. Briggs entered quietly. It's done, Briggs said. Matthew didn't answer. Victory was supposed to feel better than this. He thought of the names, the crews lost, the civilians massacred, the worlds burned. The council had paid for its arrogance. but at a cost. Briggs handed him a datapad. New orders from EarthGov. Matthew read them. A new galactic charter, human-led, built not on lies and intimidation, but on sovereignty and strength. A better future, maybe, if they were strong enough to hold it. Matthew set the pad down and stood. Signal the fleet, he said. Prepare for departure. We've got work to do. Briggs smiled grimly. Always. As the Revenant turned away from Veros Prime, Matthew looked out at the galaxy, battered, broken, but still burning with life. They hadn't fought for glory. They hadn't fought for conquest. They fought because no one else would. And now, the stars were theirs. Peace was a strange thing. It didn't come with banners or parades. It came with silence. Captain Matthew Rains stood alone on the Revenant's observation deck, watching the stars drift past. The war was over, officially. The Council was gone. Its remaining warlords either in hiding, dead, or scrambling to buy favor with the new order. And Earth? Earth stood at the center of it all. Victor. And now, ruler. The new galactic charter was signed on Ardentia 2 weeks after Veros Prime's fall. Not on Earth. Matthew had insisted on that. The war had been about freedom, not dominance. But even as the words were spoken, the truth was clear. Earth now led the galaxy. The surviving Council worlds, what few dared to resist, had no choice but to recognize it. One by one, neutral factions joined the new alliance. Trade flowed again. Refugees returned to shattered colonies. Ships once meant for war were repurposed for rebuilding. And yet, peace was not the same as safety. Matthew leaned against the viewport, arms folded. Briggs entered, quiet as ever. The new Alliance Council is meeting tomorrow, Briggs said. They want you there. Matthew snorted. Politicians. Briggs smiled faintly. They'd call you a politician now. God help us. But duty was duty. The next day, Matthew sat in the grand chamber of Ardentia's rebuilt capital, a room that had once hosted trade guilds and merchant princes, now filled with weary soldiers, diplomats, and leaders from across the stars. At the head of the table sat President Langley, re-elected in a landslide after the victory. She looked older, harder, like them all. Captain Rains, she greeted as he entered. Glad you came. I go where I'm ordered. Langley smiled thinly. No one orders you anymore, Matthew. Not really. He said nothing. The meeting was brief and brutal. Earth would lead the new alliance. A council of worlds would advise. But final authority rested with EarthGov. There were too many fractures, too much instability to risk otherwise. Langley put it plainly. If we don't lead, the chaos will. Few objected. Most were relieved. Better Earth than another council, they reasoned. But Matthew felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. Victory had a cost. Now they had to live with it. After the meeting, Keller, the sharp-eyed intelligence officer, pulled Matthew aside. There's something you should see, she said, handing him a datapad. He read it in silence. Council loyalists regrouping in the rim sectors, black market arms trades, rumors of a new coalition forming, warlords, pirates, ex-council remnants. It wasn't over. It would never be over. Back aboard the Revenant, Matthew called his officers together. The galaxy's changing, he told them. We won the war, but peace won't hold itself. Briggs nodded. We'll hunt them. Matthew's gaze swept the room. Number we build first. Rebuild the colonies. Protect the free worlds. Show them that Earth can lead without becoming what we fought against. A long silence. Then Briggs spoke. And when the next war comes, Matthew's voice was ice. Then we'll be ready. Months passed. Earth-led patrols secured trade routes. New defense pacts were signed. Worlds that had once feared humanity now sent envoys and requests for protection. The Revenant became a symbol, the ship that had led Earth to victory. But Matthew kept his crew sharp, because the shadows were growing again. One cold morning, a coded transmission reached the Revenant. Priority, Captain Rains only. Matthew read it alone in his quarters. Pirate fleet sighted near the outer colonies, multiple ex-council warlords among them. Intelligence suggested a new alliance, the seeds of another war. He set the pad down and stared at the stars. Later, Briggs joined him. "You saw the report," Matthew nodded. "It starts again." Briggs shrugged. "It never stopped." A long pause. Matthew turned to the viewport. "I've been asked to step down," he said quietly. Briggs blinked. "What?" "The Alliance Council wants to normalize things, put politicians in command." Briggs swore. "They're fools." Matthew's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "It was always going to happen. Peace breeds complacency." He looked Briggs in the eye. "But we're not stepping down." Briggs grinned. "Good." The next day, Matthew addressed his crew. "We fought for freedom," he said. "Not for power, and we'll keep fighting, to protect it." The cheers were quiet, hard. These were not men and women seeking glory. They were survivors, and they knew. The storm would come again. Weeks later, the Revenant launched on a new mission. Not a parade, not a tour. A hunt, into the rim sectors where old enemies gathered, where the next war brewed. Matthew stood on the bridge as the stars shifted. Briggs approached. "Same fight, new battlefield." Matthew nodded. "They thought they could break us," he said softly. "They thought wrong." As the Revenant vanished into the black, the galaxy held its breath. A fragile peace hung over the stars. But beneath it, fires smoldered. And when the next war came, as it always would, Earth would be ready. Because some men never stopped fighting. Not for power, not for glory, but because the fight never truly ends